as an engineer, this is exciting because you look at the tech now and you think, geez, the games in the old days were very different to now.
Well, I remember the game in the old days, and I'm actually ashamed to say Grand Prix drivers, where it started was the left and right arrow and the A and the Z key on the keyboard. So it has really evolved. And I think the important thing is from a cost perspective, that's where the manufacturers are. You know, like Formula One, it kind of started there and started to filter down. Formula E as well, is that you don't have accessibility to tracks. It's too expensive. You have a limitation on testing days. You can go through the permutations on the actual setup. And as a result, you get to the racetrack pretty much done and dusted. It's a bit of a shame because you don't have, I won't call it seat of the pants engineering, but at the end of the day, it's how the world's moving. It's more technology driven. And it's quite frankly very, very exciting for engineers, for drivers, because you can drive a racetrack. I mean, look at it this way. When an F1 team or a Formula E team or a DTM team goes to a new racetrack, the drivers have driven that track. They're ready to race that track. The engineers have set up, they know all the permutations. So it's basically whoever's got the best sim rig at the workshop is going to win the race.
A lot of these guys sit with actual engineers working on setup of the car, because the cars are that sensitive to set up now that you can have a good setup for Kyalami and then you go to the next race and it's a totally different setup and you're off the pace. This is real racing.
Whatever the engineer said, he made the setup changes. The car reacted. It did what he wanted to do. So, you know, it's maybe at the end of the day, it's not only a platform to get the crossover of driver. Maybe it's the platform to get experience for engineers to also start to dabble in the world of motorsport. It all comes down to the rigs. You know, can you replicate the G-forces? Can you replicate the bumps exactly? And I think it will get more and more sophisticated, but then the cost obviously starts to escalate. But yeah, I think you need the best of both worlds. You need the best sim rig, and you need to get to the racetrack where the drivers can feel and give the feedback to the engineer. The engineer then can interpret what the driver's saying and then make the necessary changes. But also, you know, if you look at Formula One, if you look at all these Formula One races, they've got these mission control centers back at base and feeding back on fiber lines all the way back to these places to try and activate, so that these engineers, almost before the driver gets out of the car, have got all the information to try and work out on the actual setup permutations. But there's still the human link that basically still stays there between engineer and driver.
Our situation in South Africa, and it's actually no different. I think even the big manufacturers are struggling to justify costs and keeping businesses open. It's no different here in South Africa. We've got a lot of small guys, small businesses that thrive and rely on motorsport. They've almost got to start looking at other ways to stay relevant. And that idea from an engineer perspective is a great one.
Well, you know, the thing is, you kind of got to try and diversify. And I think that's the reality of the situation that we're all sitting in. So maybe these smaller SMEs that are around and built around motorsport in South Africa could possibly offer, I don't want to call it, but maybe esports consultancy, engineering setup services or something like that. And the great thing is that maybe it starts to encourage engineering or more engineering in motorsport. I think that is a shortage that we have. And if you look at South Africa's history in engineers, Rory Byrne, Gordon Murray, just to name a few, we've got a rich history. And if we can just build on it, it would be a fantastic, maybe a byproduct of this time that we're in.